Hello. Hope everybody is well. My name is Emily, and I have a Jane Austen journal here to show you. It has positivity statements. I have embarked this year on having hopeful journals, and I believe this might be either 14 or 15, but it'll be in the description box below. But this one also has a Jane Austen theme. So it also has some quotes from her. The book is 9.5 by 6.5. It has 3 signatures, and it has a vinyl siding on the base. And what I used is a one of those expandable file folders that has this on it, and so the edge here, the 3 signatures are in these 3, and I got a whole boatload of these at my thrift store, so I've been using them. And then the vinyl, or it might even be considered leather, it's actually my brother and my son-in-law, we have furniture here in North Carolina. And so a furniture store gives away scraps. And so he was in that area of the state, and he picked up some scraps. And so that's what this looks like. It's got lace on it. And it actually has prima flowers and some other little flowers. It's got some lace on top of the actual lace that is on the surface. And I actually have a pink sort of I think it's Theodosia square pattern underneath the lace. Rather than just making it a plain, it has sort of a floral, so it gives it a little bit of character. And then I also have the Tim Holtz corners that I used, and it is together with the 3 signatures is this lace that I have put it together, and that's actually a hem binding, a lace hem tape, and it's called Oyster is the name of the. So in the book, I have 58 pages. If you do front and back, that's 116. And I have over 30 tags that can be removed. And this is a heart. I got on a wanting to make hearts, so I got this and I put it in here. This is an actual piece of fabric that had some screen printing on it, and this is picking apples. And I did a little bit of stitching around it. So each signature has a wide, the inner fold of the pleats of the file folder. I have put them on either side so that the book will have enough room that it will close without being popping open. And it also has quotes that are attached or glued to the book. So over 30 tags that can be removed, and over 25 inspirational statements, and over 20 Jane Austen quotes. So this is what would be like an inspirational statement. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And then this is a Jane Austen quote. And I used quite a few books. I have been collecting Jane Austen books for a long time, like 30 years. And now that took me forever, but I have finally gotten to the point where I will allow myself to cut into them. So I used some of the Fashion in the Time of Jane Austen by Sarah Downing. I've used clippings out of this. And in fact, the picture on the front of the book is in this, but I found it somewhere else. And it's this picture right here. So that's fashion at the time of Jane Austen. That's one of the books that I have, used. I used this one. It's Jane Austen's letters, where she wrote letters to different people. She was a huge letter writer. And if I let myself get off too much, I will end up telling you so much more than you really want to know about Jane Austen, because I know her work so well, and I have been collecting and reading material about her. But this is the letters to Cassandra, specifically, and also lots of pictures that show, and I used some of these pictures in the book from this one. And it's called My Dear Cassandra, Jane Austen, Letters to Her Sister, selected and introduced by the person who is actually the author of this book. And again, in the description box below. Jane Austen illustrated quotations. Since these books are not, her work is in the public domain, but these books are not. So I actually cut out of the raw book, and I don't make copies of the material. So I used this one, illustrated quotations. And then this particular one is In the Garden with Jane Austen. And I don't know whatever happened to the cover of it, but it just has lots of pictures of her where she lived, and samples of what her gardens would look like, or gardens that she would have visited, or gardens that she would have seen, and this was by Kim Wilson. This is actually the history of England by Jane Austen, and she wrote this book when she was 16 years old, and I really love it because it has the actual handwriting. And then her sister came in and did the little illustrations. So it was actually started with Henry VIII, I think, and then stopped at Charles the First or something. Let's see. So it's just where she wrote, but it's not like, something that you would, it's kind of in her words. So, and there's several different copies of this book. For instance, one of them that I had doesn't actually have it in her writing. It actually has the actual words, so that you can read and compare. But her handwriting is hard to read. And then this is Jane Austen's Companion to Life, and like all of these books I found at thrift stores over the years. So this is the illustrations that are done. This is just a sample of some of the illustrations out of this book that was done by a set of brothers, and they started it almost in around 1900, where they started illustrating, and they were in London and did these illustrations. Their last name was Brock, B-R-O-C-K. And so this book has information about the brothers, and that's how I found out about them. Illustrators Charles Edmund Brock and his brother Henry M. Brock. So that's that one. And then this is a fantastic book. It's all of the covers that were done by different publishers. This Signet. It's one called Red Classics. One's called the Modern Library, Oxford. It's Signet, Penguin, all of these different books. And I mean, there's even people who, you can take Jane Austen's writing. You can take courses like that in universities. But I wanted to show you just an example of, for instance, this is by one called Cassia Press, and it's Emma. And then this is called the Transatlantic Press. And then if you moved over here, this is by Penguin. So it shows 100, let's see what it says here. Cover to cover, 200 years of classic covers of all of Jane Austen's books. So that's was really interesting. And then I'll talk about that in just a minute. So I have lots of laces, and the lace just goes with Jane Austen's books. And this paper right here is a kind of, I'm not going to say mulberry paper. It's because it's published. It says the word that describes this paper is in Spanish. But if you were to actually translate it, it says paper from straw. And regenerate meaning that it has been ecologically, what would they call, regenerated. But I found it at my thrift store, and I just didn't know, I couldn't pass it up because the paper is so beautiful. Colors are just nice, beautiful pastels that are perfect for, for journaling pages. And it's thicker than the average, not too much thicker than an average. It's not 20 or 24, but maybe 32 pound. But I just thought that paper was so fantastic that I just thought that I would use it in this book and find ways to color coordinate. So this is a sample of Sense and Sensibility, and this is a sample of Mansfield Park. And then throughout the book, quotes are actually from different, from some of the different books that she wrote. So, for instance, Mansfield Park, this Mary Crawford was one of the characters in Mansfield Park. And so it has an MP right there. Edmund Bertram and Mary Crawford. If you have read Mansfield Park, then this, will ring a bell with you. This quote will ring a bell with you. I have some tags and bookmarks. And then this is actually another one of the quotes out of one of the books. And then this is where I took the beeswax and, this little iron, and you press over the beeswax and it melts. It has this wonderful texture, and I did that on some of the tags. And then I used a lot of Etsy sellers. I believe this one is Tsunami Rose, but I'll have all that in the description box below of the different Etsy sellers that I use. This is another one. Another Etsy seller, and I actually took and folded this together and then put a finish on it so that it almost has a plastic sort of and then it's just papers to write on. So I used some envelopes here and some of the work of Etsy sellers, kits, and so forth and so on. So that's that. Here is another positivity quote. And this is a positivity quote. So this is a tag that I made that has a Jane Austen quote on it. And this is where this paper here is a thicker paper. It's probably more of a 60 pound. And I found a whole stack of them, and I thought, I could see myself putting a finish on them. And so what I did was I poured coffee over my plastic tablecloth with these papers underneath it, and they just came out so beautiful. So I poured and then loosely brushed so that a lot of the it could be soaked up, and the paper was thick enough that it didn't hurt it to soak it. And then I have some plain writing pages here. This is a Tsunami Rose, where I put a little lacy finish on it. This is a couple of tags that have some of the Brock Brothers artwork on it. I used some acetate, which is what we call transparency film. I used that on some of the pictures that I didn't want to really hide hide the entire picture. And more of the just beautiful costuming. So it's really featuring a lot of the fashion in that time, the Regency period. But also she lived during the Edwardian and the Regency and another period. I'm not quite sure which one, but this is more of that beeswax. And so the book itself has a lot of pliability to it. It's very secure, but it has some movement that you can kind of play around with. It's not a stiff book. And then I picked out some pages from some of the books. And for instance, this is Westminster Cathedral, where she was buried. She was buried in 1817, but then she was moved to a cathedral in England where English authors are all buried. And then this is just a set of 3 different of these tags that you can peel off or peel and press kind of tags. I put that on a vellum and used a piece of fabric as a background, and then music paper, and then put them on here. This is a piece of wallpaper. This is more of that fabric that has a windmill on it. And I got these. These are actually postcards from Zazzle that I got several years ago, and I backed them with origami paper. And this is a picture from In the Garden with Jane Austen. It talks about her garden, her love of the garden, and it had a picture. So I just did a zigzag stitch around it. And then this is actually some handiwork. Or in the middle, I have these leaves because she was a flower lover. There's a lot of garden and mentions of gardens and flowers and plants in all of her books, and a lot of the letters that she wrote. So that's what this is, a little bit of needlework that was done on a heart and turned into a pocket. Some more of the just paper to write on, or positivity quotes. And then I don't know if you know about yo-yo buttons, but this is what we call yo-yo, and I have a book called Yo-Yos to Go that I learned how to make the yo-yos from. So lots of pages that maybe aren't earmarked for writing on, but can be used for writing on. So I tried to leave some some blank pages for that. This can be removed. It is one of the removable ones. This is actually something that I found at my thrift store. It was a stack from a library, a stack of books from a library, and it says right up here in the top in pencil, it says 1875 or 5 Peterson's magazine. So I found a big stack of these, and the paper is really thin. So I sewed 2 pieces together, but actually she was trying to save the illustrations that were in those old Peterson's magazines. Put that in there. Just beautiful Jane Austen kits from Etsy sellers. And then I made, this is sari silk attached to a tag that I made that I did some quilting on and added some buttons. Did a little bit of doodle or artwork right here. Some thinner tags that have a gold fleck on them that I played around with, more of the book covers, and then just a little, you can keep notes in there. You can pull all of these out and the book will be a lot thinner. This is a Mansfield Park and it's an Oxford edition from the Oxford Classics. Another piece of the postcard from Zazzle. Did some collaging on this page. Interesting piece of trim. It's actually wool, but it's the flowers and leaves in between, and then I just have a little tassel here. The yellow papers is fun. This one says P and P, so this is Pride and Prejudice. A quote from Pride and Prejudice. Tried to color this a little bit to show it's from one of the stories. You can't really tell from here, but it's a woman playing with her dogs. And this is from, this says JAL, and that means that it came from one of Jane Austen's letters. So more of the bookmarks, more little pieces of needlework, playing around with different textures. This is from Emma. And this is the Pride and Prejudice one. Can't I please, will you just let me stop and tell you how ardently I adore and love you? And I found a deck of cards when I was on my travels to England, actually. I found this, and it's a deck of cards with all of the different characters from her book. And so I included some of those in there. Another one of those envelopes, and this one has napkins, but they're actually tissue. It's tissue that you can peel apart and do some work on. And again, beautiful letter writing paper, more Jane Austen themed. And then this is actually a picture from let's see, Marianne in, I can't remember, was that Northanger Abbey or was that Madison? Not quite sure what book that's from. But there's a lot of characters to think of. This is more of the H.M. Brock. It says here, H.M. So, picture of, and there's a description here, and this book came out of one of those books that I mentioned to you. More of the Brock, another envelope, and this has a tag in it as well. So just a lot of fun things put in the book. Tassels, garment pins, envelopes with little goodies in them. Beautiful paper from the Etsy sellers. Laces. This actually came from Artie Mays. It's a set of her paper called Old London, and I just love that paper. Just actually absolutely love it. Time for tea. Can't have a Jane Austen book without something about tea. This is a group of women bathing in Bath. And they have this, well, it's really interesting. I could go on and talk about Jane Austen forever. But anyway, it's just really interesting what they did to swim. And this is again, the cathedral where she was. No, that was Winchester. Westminster Cathedral is where she's buried now. And this is, she spent some time in Bath. She spent time in many different cities and towns in London, and London being one of them because her brother lived there. So there could be something about London in here. And she went to a hat shop and she she wrote a letter to her sister about a hat that she bought, or the ribbons that she bought for the hat. This is something that's interesting. Back in those days, they used fans, and so I found this at my thrift store. It's actually a Chinese fan, and that's the way it came. And if I peeled this off, I would actually have the raw fan. The fan has 2 layers. But I just thought it was perfect to put in because fanning was something that people did. Here is more of the written portion of the book that she wrote on the history of the kings of England. And then this is just a picture out of the book on fashion during that time. And it shows a gown that she wore, and it describes it a little bit for you to see a little bit about it. I just think this lace, the way it all came out, was so pretty. But this is what the back side of that paper looked like. So it's a little dark for printing things onto on this side. But it's good for writing on or actually doing some collaging on. But this the back side was the one that I did the coffee dyeing onto. And this is a Mansfield Park by a book company, Barnes & Noble. Well, I mean, signature edition. So, and then this quote is from Emma Woodhouse in Emma. I put a little bit of fabric and buttons on this to sort of coordinate with the colors in the book, on the book cover. So even some of these nice pretty pages have opening where you can, and on the inside of each of the 3 signatures I put a brass leaf. You can actually remove that, so that if you wanted to put something else there or wanted to use them for something else. But just a lot of fun. I have so much Jane Austen, so many Jane Austen books that once I allowed myself to cut into them, it's been a lot of fun to use them in different books. So this is a folded of Charlton House, I think. Yeah. So it folds like this, which is one of the houses that is open to the public. And I have quite a few little gems and some charms. And this is another one of those Chinese not paintings, but paper laying that that the Chinese do. And then a tag, and this is actually it's about Bath and the Holborn Museum. And then in the very back of the book, I have I have the last envelope, which is so just a lot of fun. I really love to work with old English. I'm probably gonna start making more. I started making a lot in the past, but then and then stopped to do other things, and now I've gone back to making. So I have this huge bin of all this Jane Austen tags and things that I made like 10 years ago that I am going back and using. So thank you for watching. Appreciate your coming along with me, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.